The principles that are affirmed in the Declaration are also echoed in Canada's, some of are echoed in Canada's legal systems already. So some of the things that Anne-Marie has described, particularly taking place in BC, those are already a violation of what our legal system is set up as, and meant to do, and what we have Supreme Court jurisprudence on. So some of the battle is not, oh, we need better policies, or oh, we need better legislation. As Louise said, that's not the problem. The problem is the implementation. And when it comes to whether we're talking about Colombia or we're talking about Canada, it's about implementation. And with the Declaration, the focus of our work has been around implementation because that's where we will see the real change happen. And it's not, I've often said it's not enough for the United Nations to produce instruments if they're going to sit on the shelf in the library, but they have to be real on the ground and they have to make meaningful change. And so there's an obligation for states for implementation, but we also know from throughout the human rights work globally, implementation begins on the ground, and it begins on the ground both in communities for the Declaration and Indigenous communities, but it also happens in non-Indigenous communities and events like this where people can come and learn about things and get engaged with that work. So in the statement, which we have copies of here, this is a joint statement released today by Amnesty International, Canadian Foreign Service Committee, the Chiefs of Ontario, First Nations Women Advocating Responsible Mining, the First Nations Summit, Kairos, MiningWatch Canada, Treaty 4 First Nations, and the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs. And in the statement, there's 4 recommendations to Canada. Ensure that all processes to review and license resource development activities in Canada are consistent with constitutional obligation to protect inherent Aboriginal treaty rights and with international human rights standards, including the Declaration. To recognize free, prior, and informed consent as an essential human rights safeguard, consistent with Indigenous peoples' rights under the Canadian Constitution and international human rights law. Implement measures consistent with recommendations from the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination to ensure the accountability of Canadian corporations operating on the lands of Indigenous peoples in other countries, and support the calls for the UN Special Advisor for the Prevention of Genocide to visit Colombia as part of an independent assessment of the emergency situation facing Indigenous peoples in that country. And so, as I said, they're up there. This would also be posted on those various organizations' websites if those all go. But that's and so that statement was released today. So that's part of the work that we're working on connected to implementing the Declaration. And I should say that also tomorrow, it'll be broadcast live tomorrow, but it's archived for people who aren't available tomorrow afternoon. But tomorrow afternoon from 1:30 to 4, there's a live webinar, which Anne-Marie will also be speaking on, which is dealing with the UN Declaration, free, prior, and informed consent, and legal effect. And that is being broadcast by the Assembly of First Nations. So if you go to their website, which is simply www.afn.ca, it'll take you into the webinar. And they'll also archive the webinar, so if you're not available to watch it tomorrow afternoon, you can. And there will also be documents that are on that topic that will be with the webinar that will also be archived on their website.